Ron DeSantis' name keeps being floated as a possible 2024 challenger to Donald Trump in the Republican primary. And when this first started being discussed, it seemed kind of silly because Trump has such an obvious hold over the Republican Party. And you would look at any poll and Trump was dominating. But what people pointed out is that as time went on and as each day passed, DeSantis actually made a lot of strides in closing that gap in the polling between him and Trump, possible 2024 polls, that is. Now, before we continue with discussing this, I do want to just say Ron DeSantis is bad news. I think he is very, very vile. I think he has bad intentions, just like Trump, and would do a lot of damage as president. So this is not, let's root for Ron DeSantis to beat Trump or root for Trump to beat DeSantis. Either way, it's going to be bad. You could make arguments for why either might have a worse effect. And here's what I mean by that. Ron DeSantis might have a better chance of beating a Democratic nominee because Trump these days is so damaged. So you could say, oh, I want Trump to get the nomination so that we have a better chance of beating him. But then would Trump be more damaging if he got into office, if he did win? Lots of considerations. But point is, we're not really rooting for any of them. We're just checking in on the reality of that situation. So we see that DeSantis just keeps rising in the polls against Trump, and Trump just kind of keeps dropping. Reading from the Washington Examiner, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has closed the gap significantly between himself and Donald Trump in a hypothetical matchup in 2024, bringing him within single digits of the former president. Among registered Republican voters, about 45% said they would vote for Trump compared to 36% who leaned towards DeSantis, according to the most recent YouGov Yahoo News poll. A 9-point difference and the closest any challenger has ever gotten to the former president in a GOP primary poll. The most recent numbers tighten previous polls that showed DeSantis trailing by 16 points in February and 23 points the month before that. So you can see 36% to 45%, Trump is still in a significant lead, but each time we check in on these polls, DeSantis is getting closer and closer. So while if these polls represented the votes cast and the election happened today, Trump would become the nominee, right? But there seems to be a momentum shift in DeSantis' direction, and that's what we're looking at. But then something that made news is in a hypothetical 2024 New Hampshire poll, Republican primary voters say, and again, New Hampshire is one of those early important primary states, so it is actually more representative of political leanings, the possible political outcomes that we're predicting than just any old random state. An interesting poll came out of there. Reading from MSNBC, a new University of New Hampshire Granite State poll shows Florida Governor Ron DeSantis neck and neck with former President Donald Trump among likely Republican presidential primary voters in New Hampshire, with DeSantis receiving the support of 39% of respondents and Trump 37%. So DeSantis is beating Trump in this New Hampshire Republican primary voters poll. That is insane. The 2% gap falls within the poll's margin of error, which means they're effectively tied. It's a massive leap for DeSantis, who is trailing Trump 18% to 43% in the same poll in October. It went from 18% to 43% to DeSantis winning and then being effectively tied. That is massive. And part of the reason for this is, of course, DeSantis has been getting a lot of national attention for the radical stuff that he's been doing in Florida, but also Trump is getting, further and further characterized as a massive threat to democracy each day as information comes out of these January 6th committee hearings. And we're seeing some political shifts because of the hearings in regard to Donald Trump, people believing he's responsible for January 6th, people believing, even Republicans, some of them shifting their view on if he should be held criminally responsible. So that's having a massive effect as well. Taking a look at this, an ABC News Ipsos poll released last week suggested a slight increase in the percentage of Americans and Republicans who thought Trump should face criminal charges. That's a big opinion to change, a big stance to change your opinion on, I should say. 58% overall and 19% among Republicans. So 58% of the country believes Trump should be held criminally responsible for his actions trying to overturn the election, and 20% of Republicans say they think he should be held criminally responsible. But what's interesting is, as the Post's Philip Bump wrote, those numbers were up from previous Washington Post ABC News polls asking the same question shortly after the insurrection and again in April 2022, when only 1 in 10 Republicans thought Trump should be charged. So it went from 1 in 10 to 19. about doubled. So it went from 10% to almost 20%. The amount of Republicans who think Trump should be held criminally responsible, should be criminally charged for his actions on and leading up to January 6th. That's huge. And that amount of shift can be a huge indicator that people are going to start looking for a different Republican candidate within the Republican Party. And that person looks like it's going to be Ron DeSantis. So this is not to say that Trump has no chance in 2024. He's still winning in national polling significantly. So as of now, he still has control of the party, but he has collected in the last few months a lot of baggage because the January 6th committee has done a really good job of reaching out to the broader population of America who's less engaged with politics and showing them this information about Trump and revealing things to them that they hadn't previously been aware of. And so I do think there's a little bit of a public opinion shift about Trump, about how much of a threat he is to democracy. And that's going to play a huge role in if Republicans feel comfortable nominating him. Because even if you don't necessarily think that Trump is responsible or you don't think that Trump is terrible, as a Republican, you might think, but a lot of the country does because of the January 6th hearings and all the information around that. So I'm going to pick DeSantis because he seems safer. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Trump, DeSantis, 2024, who do you think would be more dangerous to the country? Who do you think would have a better chance of beating a Democrat? And how does that play into your calculus? As well as just who do you think is more likely to get the nomination for the Republican presidential candidate?